The laptop screen cast a harsh glow across my face as I stared at the email thread, my fingers hovering motionless over the keyboard. 3 hours had passed since I'd accidentally stumbled into Ryan's account, left open on our shared computer, and I still couldn't process what I was reading. I'm Iris, and until tonight, I thought I understood my marriage. Have you managed to keep her focused where we discussed? Evelyn's message read. Remember, darling, a wife who feels too independent becomes difficult to guide. Our plan needs patience. My husband's response made my stomach turn. Don't worry, Mother. Iris still thinks everything's her idea. The transfer will happen soon enough. The words blurred as tears threatened to spill. I blinked them back, refusing to cry. The timestamp showed this exchange happened just yesterday, while Ryan and I were planning our future together over dinner. While he smiled and nodded at my career goals, he was plotting with his mother to, what exactly? Control me? Steal from me? My phone buzzed. Ryan's face lit up the screen. Hey, beautiful? Running late at the office? Don't wait up. I cleared my throat. No problem. Everything okay? Just finishing up some reports. Miss you. The casual lie in his voice made my skin crawl. I'd seen his calendar. He had dinner scheduled with Evelyn tonight, another secret meeting to discuss their plan. Miss you too, I managed, the words tasting like ash. After hanging up, I scrolled through months of correspondence between them. Each message revealed new layers of manipulation. They discussed everything from undermining my confidence at work to slowly isolating me from my friends. Even my recent promotion had been a source of concern for them. She's getting too ambitious, Evelyn had written. Remember what happened with your father when he started believing he could make decisions without me. The front door clicked open downstairs. I quickly closed the laptop and moved to our bedroom, mind racing. Ryan's footsteps on the stairs were steady, unhurried, the pace of a man who believed his secrets were safe. You're still up? He appeared in the doorway, loosening his tie. The familiar gesture seemed sinister now, like watching an actor perform a well-rehearsed role. Couldn't sleep. I forced a smile. How was work? Brutal. These quarterly reports are killing me. He sat on the bed, reaching for my hand. You okay? You look tense. I let him take it, studying his face. The concern in his eyes seemed genuine, and that was perhaps the most terrifying part. He'd gotten so good at this. Actually, I wanted to talk about something. I kept my voice steady. I've been thinking about our joint account. His fingers twitched almost imperceptibly against mine. What about it? I'm considering separating our finances, for tax purposes. The flash of panic in his eyes confirmed everything. He recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. Why would you want to do that? His tone was carefully neutral. We've always handled everything together, as partners. Partners. The word hung between us like a bad joke. Just a thought, I said, pulling my hand away. We can discuss it tomorrow. You must be tired after dinner with your mother. He froze for a split second. What? Oh, sorry, I meant after your late meeting. My mistake. The silence that followed was deafening. Ryan's face went through a series of micro-expressions: surprise, fear, calculation, and finally, something close to anger. Have you been checking my calendar? His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. Does it matter? I met his gaze steadily. We're partners, aren't we? He stood up abruptly. I need a shower. As the bathroom door closed behind him, I heard him pulling out his phone, no doubt calling Evelyn, reporting this unexpected development in their careful plans. I lay back on the bed, mind already racing ahead. They thought they were so clever, playing their long game, but they'd forgotten something crucial. I wasn't the same naive woman they'd started manipulating 3 years ago, and now that I knew the truth, I had plans of my own. 3 days after discovering the emails, I came home to find Evelyn's Mercedes parked in our driveway. Moving boxes were stacked by the front door, and the sound of her voice drifted from inside our house, my house, like poison in the air. Really, darling, the guest room is perfect. I can keep an eye on everything from there. I stood frozen on the doorstep, my work bag suddenly heavy on my shoulder. Ryan appeared in the hallway, carrying another box. "Surprise?" he beamed, as if he'd just arranged the most thoughtful gift. "Mom's pipes burst at her place. She'll be staying with us for a while." The calculated timing was impressive. Of course she'd show up now, just when I was starting to piece together their scheme. "How long is a while?" I managed to ask. "Oh, don't worry about that, dear." Evelyn emerged from the guest room, her perfectly manicured hands clasped together. "The contractor said it could be weeks, maybe months, but I'll make myself useful. I know how overwhelmed you've been lately." My fingers tightened around my bag strap. "I'm not overwhelmed." Now. She patted my arm as she passed, her touch light but somehow invasive. "Ryan tells me you've been acting rather stressed, checking his calendar, asking about finances. That's not like you at all." The look she gave me was pure concern, but her eyes were sharp as razors. Ryan shifted uncomfortably between us. "I thought having Mom here might help," he said. "You know, take some pressure off." "Pressure," I repeated. The word tasted bitter. "Right." That night, I lay awake listening to their muffled voices from downstairs. The guest room shared a wall with our bedroom, and I could hear Evelyn unpacking, each drawer closing like a countdown to something inevitable. My phone lit up with a text from Ryan. "Coming to bed soon. Love you." He was 20 feet away in our own house, texting instead of speaking. The distance wasn't physical anymore. The next morning, I found Evelyn reorganizing my kitchen cabinets. "The flow was all wrong," she explained, not looking up. "Ryan always said you struggled with organization. But don't worry, I'll fix everything." I opened my mouth to object, but she was already continuing. "Oh, and I took the liberty of canceling your dinner plans with Sarah tonight. Ryan mentioned you've been working so hard lately. You need rest, not social obligations." My coffee cup hit the counter harder than intended. "You did what?" "It's for the best, dear. Sarah's influence hasn't been beneficial lately, all that talk about independent women and career advancement." She smiled, sugar sweet. "Sometimes friends can plant dangerous ideas." The pieces clicked together. Sarah had been encouraging me to apply for a director position, a promotion that would put me ahead of Ryan in salary. "I can manage my own social calendar," I said, keeping my voice level. "Of course you can, dear." She reached up to pat my cheek. "But as Ryan's mother, it's my duty to protect this marriage. We wouldn't want you making any impulsive decisions." The threat was clear beneath her words. I stepped back, my mind racing. They were moving faster than I'd anticipated, already working to isolate me. That evening, Ryan came home early for the first time in months. He found me in our home office, supposedly working late. "Mom made dinner," he said, hovering in the doorway. "Your favorite." I didn't look up from my laptop. "Not hungry." He sighed. "Iris, I know this is an adjustment, but Mom means well. She just wants to help." "Help with what, exactly?" The question hung between us. I finally looked at him, really looked at him. The man I married was still there somewhere, buried beneath layers of his mother's manipulation. But I couldn't reach him anymore. "Come down to dinner," he said softly. "Please? For me?" I closed my laptop. "Of course. Wouldn't want to disappoint anyone." As I followed him downstairs, I could feel Evelyn's satisfaction radiating through the house. She thought she was tightening her grip, but she'd made a crucial mistake. In trying to control every aspect of my life, she'd given me a front-row seat to their operation, and I intended to take careful notes. The bank statement trembled in my hands as I stared at the transaction history. Over the past 6 months, nearly $40,000 had been siphoned from our joint savings account through a series of small transfers. Each one labeled as household expenses or maintenance costs, all authorized by Ryan. I'd been tracking the money trail for weeks, watching our account balance dwindle while Evelyn paraded around in new designer outfits, and Ryan made excuses about inflation and rising costs. But seeing the full scope of their deception made my chest tight with rage. A knock at my office door startled me. "Come in," I called, quickly minimizing the browser window. "Mrs. Mitchell?" My assistant poked her head in. There's a David Carter here to see you. Says it's personal? The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Evelyn's ex-husband. What could he possibly want? Send him in. David Carter looked nothing like I'd imagined from Evelyn's bitter descriptions of her failure of an ex. He was tall, distinguished, with kind eyes that carried a familiar wariness I recognized from my own mirror. Iris, he said, closing the door behind him. I hope you'll forgive the intrusion, but when I heard Evelyn moved in with you and Ryan... He paused, choosing his words carefully. Let's just say I couldn't stay silent anymore. How did you know where to find me? My wife Sophia works in marketing too. Different firm, but same circles. He sat down, his expression grave. We've been watching Evelyn's patterns repeat themselves. The same tactics she used to destroy our marriage, she's using on you. My throat tightened. The money. He nodded. Started small with us too. Then suddenly, I was drowning in debt I couldn't explain. By the time I figured it out, he pulled out his phone, scrolling through some documents. Well, let's just say you're catching on faster than I did. The office door burst open. Ryan stood there, his face flushed with anger. What the hell is this? Ryan, I started, but he cut me off. Mother warned me you might try something like this. His voice shook. Meeting with her ex-husband, behind my back? David stood slowly. Your mother warned you because she knew I'd tell the truth about her, about what she did to our family. Get out. Ryan's hands were clenched into fists. You have no right to be here. Actually, I said, standing up, I invited him. The lie came easily, because I needed answers about the $40,000 you and your mother stole from our savings. The color drained from Ryan's face. That's not... I can explain. Mrs. Bennett? My assistant appeared behind Ryan, looking concerned. Security is on their way up. That won't be necessary, David said calmly. I'm leaving. But Iris, my wife, and I would love to have you over for dinner sometime, when you're ready to hear the whole story. He handed me a business card and walked out, leaving Ryan and me in a silence thick with unspoken accusations. You had no right, Ryan finally said, his voice low and dangerous. That money was for our future. Our future, I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. Or your mother's shopping addiction. She needed help, after everything she's done for us. For you, I corrected. Everything she's done for you. And now you're letting her destroy our marriage, just like she destroyed hers. His face hardened. You don't understand anything about my mother. No, I said quietly. But I'm starting to understand everything about you. That night I sat in my car outside David and Sophia's house, their business card crumpled in my hand. Through their window I could see them moving around their kitchen, cooking together, laughing. They looked peaceful, happy. My phone buzzed with another text from Ryan. Where are you? Mom's worried. Of course she was. Her carefully constructed web was starting to unravel, and she could feel her grip loosening. I took a deep breath and got out of the car. It was time to learn exactly what I was up against, and more importantly, how to fight back. As I walked toward their front door, I felt something shift inside me. The last traces of doubt and guilt melting away, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. They wanted to play games with my life? Fine. But they were about to learn I was done playing by their rules. Sophia's kitchen smelled like fresh coffee and honesty, a combination I hadn't experienced in weeks. She placed a manila folder on the table between us, her expression gentle but firm. Before you open this, she said, you need to understand something. What happened to David wasn't just about money. It was about control. My hands hovered over the folder. Inside were copies of bank statements, court documents, and photographs spanning David and Evelyn's marriage. Each page told a story of calculated destruction, assets drained, relationships poisoned, reality twisted until truth became whatever Evelyn declared it to be. She convinced him he was losing his mind, Sophia continued, made him doubt every decision, every memory. By the end, he couldn't even trust himself to manage his own bank account. The parallels made my stomach lurch. I thought about the mistakes I'd been making lately, appointments I supposedly forgot, conversations I supposedly misremembered. How Ryan would exchange knowing looks with his mother, their concern masking something darker. My phone buzzed. Another message from Ryan. Meeting got canceled, coming home early. We need to talk. They're accelerating their timeline, I said, showing Sophia the text. Ever since David showed up at my office. They're scared. She leaned forward. You're not following their script anymore. I flipped through more documents, stopping at a familiar name, Carter Engineering Solutions. This was David's company? Built it from nothing. Evelyn convinced him to add her name to the incorporation documents. For tax purposes, she said. 6 months later, she'd transferred controlling interest to herself and pushed him out of his own business. My hands started shaking. Last week, Ryan had suggested I add him as a partner to my freelance consulting business, for tax purposes. I have to go, I said, standing abruptly. I need to get to the bank before... The next text from Ryan stopped me cold. Mom's handling some paperwork for us. She says it's urgent. Don't go home, Sophia said, reading my expression. Stay here tonight. We can help you figure out... No. I gathered my things, mind racing. If I don't show up, they'll know something's wrong. I need to keep playing along until I can protect myself legally. The drive home felt like entering enemy territory. Ryan's car was already in the driveway, along with Evelyn's Mercedes. Through the living room window, I could see them sitting together, heads bent over documents. Inside, the air felt thick with anticipation. Ryan looked up with relief that seemed almost genuine. There you are. Mom's been helping me organize our finances, making everything more efficient. Evelyn smiled, sliding a stack of papers across the coffee table. Just a few signatures needed, dear. Standard power of attorney forms, in case anything happens to you, of course. Ryan needs to be able to manage your affairs. My pulse roared in my ears as I picked up the papers, pretending to read them. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to sit down instead. Actually, I said carefully, I've been thinking about our financial situation too. Ryan and Evelyn exchanged a quick glance. I'd like to meet with a financial advisor first, I continued, someone independent, to review everything. That won't be necessary, Evelyn said sharply. Then, softening her tone, we're family, dear. Family takes care of its own. I looked at Ryan, really looked at him, searching for any trace of the man I'd married. His eyes dropped to the floor. You're right, I said, picking up the pen. Family does take care of its own. I scribbled something that looked nothing like my signature on the last page, buying myself time. Tomorrow, I'd visit my lawyer with David's documents. Tonight, I needed to secure copies of our records before they disappeared. There, I smiled, standing up. All done. I should get some work done before bed. As I headed upstairs, I heard Evelyn's satisfied murmur. See? I told you she'd cooperate eventually. In our bedroom, I opened my laptop and began transferring files to a secure drive. My fake signature wouldn't hold up under scrutiny, I knew that. But it didn't need to. It just needed to keep them confident, while I dismantled their plan piece by piece. The weight of their betrayal pressed against my chest, but something else was growing stronger. Determination. They thought they were closing their trap, but they'd just given me exactly what I needed, proof of their intentions. Now the real work could begin. The annual Mitchell family dinner always felt like a performance, but tonight the air crackled with something darker. Evelyn had invited the entire extended family to celebrate our growing bonds. 20 relatives packed into our dining room, watching me serve the meal she'd insisted on planning. Iris, dear, the plates go on the left, Evelyn called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. Though I suppose attention to detail isn't your strong suit lately. Ryan's cousins exchanged knowing looks. I set down the plates, my hands steady despite the rage building in my chest. For 2 weeks, I'd been gathering evidence, moving money, preparing my escape. I just needed to maintain the facade a little longer. Speaking of attention to detail, Evelyn continued, raising her voice further, Ryan tells me you've been making some concerning decisions at work. Turning down that lateral move he suggested? I froze. The lateral move was actually a demotion Ryan had tried to convince me to take. one that would have put me under his department's control. I'm happy in my current position, I said carefully. Happiness isn't everything, dear. Sometimes we need others to guide us when we're not thinking clearly. She turned to the table. Did I tell you all about the time Iris forgot to pay our property taxes? Thank goodness Ryan caught it in time. My fingers tightened around the serving spoon. I hadn't forgotten. Ryan had intercepted the mail and hidden the notice, then saved the day by paying it himself. Another piece of their gaslighting puzzle. Mother, Ryan warned softly, but Evelyn was on a roll. And now she's been meeting with strange men during work hours. That David Carter fellow? She shook her head sadly. When someone starts hiding things from their spouse. The serving spoon clattered to the floor. The room went silent. Would you like to know what I was really discussing with David? My voice came out surprisingly calm. We were talking about how you destroyed his company, how you're trying to do the same thing to me. Iris, Ryan stood up, his face flushing. That's enough. No, it's not. I pulled out my phone, opening the folder of evidence I'd been collecting. Should we discuss the $40,000 you stole from our savings? Or the power of attorney forms you tried to trick me into signing? Evelyn's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. Ryan, I think your wife is having another one of her episodes. Episodes? I laughed, the sound sharp and foreign. Like the ones you convinced David he was having before you took everything from him? You're embarrassing yourself, Ryan hissed, grabbing my arm. And you're upsetting Mother. I yanked away from him, addressing the shocked faces around the table. Did any of you know that Evelyn's broken pipes were a lie? That she moved in here to help Ryan isolate me from my friends? To gain control of my assets? That's absurd, Evelyn said, but several relatives shifted uncomfortably. They'd seen this before, I realized. They'd watched her do it to others. Show them the papers, Ryan, I challenged. Show them what you and your mother were trying to get me to sign. Instead of responding, Ryan turned to the guests. I'm so sorry, everyone. Iris has been under a lot of stress lately. Mother's been trying to help, but... Always the devoted son, I said quietly. Tell me, does it bother you that she's using the exact same playbook on me that she used on your father? Or does it feel normal now, watching her destroy someone else's life? The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn stood slowly, her composure cracking. I will not be spoken to this way in my own... Your home? I cut her off. This isn't your home, but you're right about one thing. I pulled off my wedding ring, letting it fall onto the dining table with a hollow ping. I don't belong here anymore. As I walked out, leaving the chaos behind me, I heard Ryan calling my name. But it was Evelyn's voice that followed me to the door, sharp with fury. You'll regret this, when you have nothing left. No. I turned back one last time. That's where you're wrong. For the first time since I met your son, I finally have everything I need. The truth. The door closed behind me with a satisfying click. In my car, my phone lit up with messages from Ryan's relatives, some expressing shock, others sharing their own stories of Evelyn's manipulation. The facade had cracked, and the truth was spilling out. It wasn't the revenge I'd planned, but somehow, this felt better. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying your enemies. It's about exposing them to the light. The police officer's flashlight beam cut through my car window, momentarily blinding me. Step out of the vehicle, Mrs. Mitchell. 3 hours after walking out of the family dinner, I'd returned home to collect some essentials. Instead, I found 2 police cruisers in my driveway and Ryan standing with Evelyn, his face a mask of concern. She's been acting erratically, I heard Evelyn say as I got out. We're worried she might harm herself, or others. The second officer was already searching my car. Ma'am, your husband says you took some important financial documents. He's concerned about your state of mind. Those documents prove they've been stealing from me. My voice shook despite my efforts to stay calm. Call my lawyer. She has copies. Your lawyer? Ryan stepped forward, perfect worry lines creasing his forehead. Honey, you don't have a lawyer. This paranoia started when you began meeting with Mother's ex-husband. The officers exchanged looks. Of course they'd believe him. the concerned husband, the devoted son protecting his mother. I'd played right into their hands by coming back alone at night. "Check my phone," I said. "The evidence." But my phone wasn't in my pocket. With horrifying clarity, I remembered setting it down on the kitchen counter when I'd come inside. Through the window, I could see Evelyn watching me, my phone visible in her hand. "Mrs. Mitchell," the first officer said gently, "we can do this voluntarily, or we can make it official. Your family's arranged for a psychiatric evaluation, for your own safety." The pieces clicked together. This was their endgame, not just controlling me, but discrediting me entirely. Once I was committed, even temporarily, everything I'd said about them would be dismissed as delusions. "Ryan," I turned to him, searching for any trace of the man I'd married. "You know what she's doing. You know this isn't right." Something flickered in his eyes. Doubt, maybe even guilt. But then Evelyn's hand touched his arm and his expression hardened. "I just want you to get help," he said. "Mother knows an excellent facility." "I bet she does?" I laughed, the sound bordering on hysteric. "Let me guess. The same one David ended up in before she took his company." "See how she obsesses over these conspiracy theories?" Evelyn's voice dripped with concern. "Officers, please, before she hurts herself." The police moved closer. Fight or flight instinct kicked in, but both options would only prove their point about my instability. I had to think bigger, longer term. "Okay," I said quietly. "I'll go voluntarily, but I want to call someone first." "I don't think," Evelyn started, but the officer nodded. "Supervised call only." I recited Sophia's number from memory, praying she'd understand what I couldn't say directly. When she answered, I kept my voice steady. "It's Iris. I'm at the house with Ryan and Evelyn. The police are here to take me for a psychiatric evaluation." I emphasized each word carefully. "Could you tell David I'm sorry I couldn't finish our business discussion about his old company records?" A pause. Then Sophia's voice, sharp with understanding. "Don't sign anything. We'll have someone there in 30 minutes. "That's enough!" Evelyn snapped, moving to end the call. But it was enough. David's documented history with Evelyn, combined with the financial records I'd already given my lawyer, would raise too many questions for them to risk holding me. "Actually," the second officer said, checking his radio, "we just got a call from your lawyer, Mrs. Mitchell. She's requested we wait for her arrival." Evelyn's composure cracked. "This is ridiculous. My son has the right—" "Your son," I cut in, "doesn't have any rights over me. Those power of attorney papers were never legally signed." Ryan stepped toward me, but stopped when I flinched away. "Iris, please, let us help you." "Help me?" I looked between them, mother and son, their masks slipping to reveal the desperation beneath. "You never wanted to help me? You wanted to own me?" Flashing lights appeared at the end of the street, not police this time, but my lawyer's car. As it approached, I saw Evelyn's hand tighten on Ryan's arm, her nails digging in like talons. The game wasn't over, but the rules had changed. They'd pushed me to the edge, thinking I'd break. Instead, they'd given me exactly what I needed, proof of how far they'd go to maintain control. Now it was my turn to push back. The bank manager's office felt too small for the storm brewing inside it. Ryan sat across from me, his lawyer nervously shuffling papers, while my own attorney laid out documents like playing cards in a high-stakes game. "As you can see," she said, "these transfers were made without Mrs. Mitchell's knowledge or consent. Furthermore, we have evidence of systematic financial manipulation dating back 18 months. Ryan's face remained carefully blank, but his fingers drummed against his knee, a tell I'd learned to recognize during poker nights that felt like a lifetime ago. "There must be some mistake," his lawyer started, but I cut in. "Show him the Cayman accounts." The color drained from Ryan's face. "How did you—" "David kept excellent records," I said quietly, "including the offshore accounts Evelyn used to hide his company's assets before she took control. Funny how you used the exact same bank." A knock at the door made us all jump. The bank manager stepped back in, looking grave. "Mrs. Mitchell, the transfer you requested is complete. All joint accounts have been frozen pending investigation." Ryan's phone buzzed. I could picture Evelyn's name flashing on the screen, her carefully constructed world starting to crumble as her access to the money vanished. "You can't do this," Ryan's voice cracked. Your mother needs to pay back what she stole." I leaned forward. From me, from David, from everyone she's manipulated over the years, the DA is very interested in her pattern of financial exploitation. His phone buzzed again, more urgent this time. Ryan stared at it like a lifeline. "Go ahead," I said. "Answer it. Let her know that her safety net is gone, that her precious son can't fix this for her." Instead, he switched the phone off. For the first time since this began, I saw something shift in his eyes, like a spell breaking. "I never meant," he started, then stopped. "The money was supposed to be temporary, just until Mother got back on her feet." "Like it was temporary with David? With your father?" I pulled out one final document, a bank statement showing recent transfers to a private psychiatric facility. "Or were you planning to make me disappear like the others who stood up to her?" The lawyer beside him stiffened, clearly hearing this for the first time. "That wasn't... I wouldn't have..." Ryan's facade cracked completely. "She said it was for your own good, that you needed help. The only thing I needed was a husband strong enough to choose me over his mother's manipulation." A commotion outside the office drew our attention. Through the glass wall, I saw Evelyn arguing with security, her perfectly maintained appearance showing signs of strain. When she spotted me, her eyes narrowed with a hatred that made my skin crawl. "Mr. Mitchell," my lawyer said firmly, "your mother is not permitted on these premises during these proceedings. If she enters this room, we will add harassment to the charges." Ryan stood up, torn between decades of conditioning and the truth laying bare before him. For a moment, I saw the man I'd married, scared, confused, desperate for approval. "I did love you," he said softly. "I know. That's what made it so easy for her to use you against me." He moved toward the door, then paused. "What happens now?" "Now?" I met his gaze steadily. "Now you get to choose. But whatever you decide, I'm done being a character in your mother's power plays." As he stepped out, I heard Evelyn's voice rise. "Ryan, darling, tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Your wife is clearly unwell." The door closed, muffling their voices. Through the glass, I watched Ryan straighten his shoulders and, for the first time in our marriage, walk away from his mother's outstretched hand. My lawyer gathered the documents, her expression satisfied. "The criminal investigation will take time, but with David's evidence and the bank records..." I barely heard her. I was watching Evelyn's face as security escorted her out, her mask finally shattering to reveal the desperate, frightened woman beneath. The woman who'd spent her life destroying others to maintain control, only to end up more alone than ever. It wasn't the revenge I'd imagined, but somehow it felt more complete. Sometimes the best punishment isn't what you do to your enemies, but what they do to themselves when their lies finally catch up with them. The support group circle felt intimate yet exposed, like standing in a spotlight that illuminated only the truth. 12 women, each carrying stories that echoed fragments of my own. "My name is Iris," I said, my voice steady, "and I'm here because survival isn't enough anymore." The conference room at David and Sophia's law firm had become a sanctuary every Wednesday evening, a place where masks could fall away, where manipulation lost its power in the light of shared experience. "The criminal charges against Evelyn go to trial next month," I continued, "but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because yesterday, I saw a woman at my bank showing the same signs I missed 3 years ago. The controlled movements, the nervous glances at her husband, the careful answers about her own money." The door opened quietly, and Sarah, my friend from work, the one Evelyn had tried to separate me from, slipped in. She gave me an encouraging nod. "I watched this woman sign away her financial independence," I said, "and I realized that revenge wasn't what I needed. What I needed was to turn this pain into something useful." A text message lit up my phone. Ryan's name. I'd received dozens since the investigation began, each one a mixture of apology and justification. Each one deleted, unread. Some wounds weren't meant to be reopened. "The legal fund we're building," I gestured to the donation box by the door. isn't just about money. It's about giving women the resources I almost lost, the power to fight back before they lose themselves. Later in David's office, we reviewed the latest case files. 3 more women had come forward with stories about Evelyn's past schemes. The pattern stretched back decades, each victim isolated and discredited until they believed their own destruction was their fault. The DA thinks she'll take a plea deal, David said, his eyes tired but satisfied. Too much evidence, too many witnesses. And Ryan? Cooperating finally, though I suspect that has more to do with protecting himself than finding redemption. Through the window, I could see Evelyn's Mercedes being sold at auction, along with the other assets frozen by the investigation. The sight didn't bring the satisfaction I'd once craved. Instead, I felt something closer to peace, not because of what I'd taken from her, but because of what I'd reclaimed for myself. Sophia entered with a stack of intake forms. 3 new members for next week's group, word spreading. Good, I said, picking up my bag, but right now I have a bank to visit. The same teller who'd helped me freeze my accounts months ago recognized me immediately. She gestured subtly toward a woman filling out forms at a desk, the one I'd noticed yesterday, the one whose hands shook just like mine once had. I approached carefully, noting how she angled the paperwork away from view. A learned behavior hiding in plain sight. "Excuse me," I said softly. "I couldn't help but notice your filling out power of attorney forms." She stiffened, a flash of fear crossing her face. "My husband says it's necessary for tax purposes." The familiar words hit like an echo. I placed one of our support group cards on her desk. "Before you sign," I said, "I'd like to tell you a story about tax purposes, about a woman who almost lost everything because she trusted the wrong people to define her worth." She hesitated, then picked up the card. Our eyes met, and I saw something spark behind her uncertainty, the same ember of defiance I'd discovered in myself. "Would you like to hear that story?" I asked. She glanced at the unsigned forms, then back at me. Nodded slowly. As we walked toward the coffee shop across the street, I felt the weight of my own journey settle into something stronger than revenge, more lasting than justice. Every woman who found her way to our group was another link in a chain of resistance, each one stronger for having been tested. The story wasn't over, but at least now we were the ones writing it.
The package sat on my desk like a landmine waiting to detonate. No return address. Just my name in precise block letters, the kind someone uses when they don't want their handwriting recognized. "Scarlett, the quarterly reports are due tomorrow." Oliver called from his office doorway. "Everything on track?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. The manila envelope seemed to pulse with dark energy. I'd been staring at it for 20 minutes, fingers hovering over the metal clasp, stomach churning. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Oliver said, stepping into my office. "Everything all right?" "Fine." I slipped the package into my drawer. "Just need coffee. Reports will be done by 5. The moment Oliver left, I locked my door and retrieved the envelope. My hands trembled as I worked the clasp open. Inside was a single photograph, glossy and new. The image hit me like a physical blow. Miles, my husband of 8 years, sat on a park bench with his arm around a woman I'd never seen. She was beautiful in that effortless way that makes other women hate themselves a little. But it wasn't her perfectly styled hair or designer sundress that made my blood run cold. It was the baby in her arms, a baby with Miles's distinctive green eyes and cleft chin. My phone buzzed. A text from Miles? "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." I stared at his message until the words blurred. How many other nights had he been working late while building his secret family? The lies stretched back through our marriage like poison ivy, choking everything they touched. The photo slipped from my fingers, landing face up on my desk. The happy little family smiled up at me, mocking every fertility treatment, every negative pregnancy test, every time Miles had held me while I cried about our inability to conceive. "It's not meant to be," he'd say. "We're enough for each other." My phone buzzed again. Jenna this time. "Dress shopping tomorrow. Can't wait to see you, sis." My sister's excitement felt like acid in my chest. Her engagement party was this weekend. She'd asked Miles to give a toast. The thought of him standing there, playing the role of devoted husband while his mistress and child waited somewhere in the wings, made me physically ill. I grabbed my trash can just in time. When I could breathe again, I studied the photo more carefully. The timestamp in the corner showed it was taken 3 days ago. The location tag read Riverside Park. They weren't even trying to hide. Scarlett? Oliver's voice accompanied another knock. Conference call in 5. Coming? I tucked the photo into my purse and straightened my blazer. The woman in my office mirror looked exactly the same as she had this morning. How strange that catastrophe leaves no visible marks. The conference call dragged on for an hour. I contributed when necessary, my professional mask firmly in place while my mind raced through years of subtle clues I'd missed or dismissed. The separate bank account for investment purposes. The mysterious work trips that never quite aligned with his company's calendar. The way he'd stopped talking about our future children. When 5 o'clock arrived, I sent Miles a text. Hope work isn't too stressful. Love you. His response came quickly. Miss you. See you tonight. I gathered my things, said goodbye to Oliver, and walked to my car with steady steps. Inside, I pulled out the photo again. The anonymous sender had given me a gift, really. The truth, however ugly, was better than living a lie. I started my car and pointed it toward Riverside Park. It was time to see if Miles's little family kept to a regular schedule. You have to try this one. Jenna twirled in a cloud of white tulle, her face glowing. The beating is exactly what I wanted. I forced a smile, though my jaw ached from maintaining this facade. The bridal boutique's lights felt too bright, the champagne too warm, the moment too false. The photograph in my purse might as well have been radioactive. It's beautiful, I managed, but maybe something less princess-like? You've got 4 more to try. Diane cleared her throat from her perch on the velvet settee. Speaking of princesses, Scarlett, when are you and Miles planning to give me a grandchild? The clock is ticking. My champagne flute trembled. I set it down before anyone could notice. We're focusing on careers right now. Nonsense. Diane waved her hand dismissively. Miles makes more than enough, and you're not getting any younger. Jenna shot me an apologetic look as she disappeared behind the curtain to change. I could hear her humming. She always hummed when she was happy. Actually, I said, my voice steady despite the rage bubbling beneath. Miles and I had some tests done, fertility issues. The lie tasted bitter, but not as bitter as the truth. Oh. Diane's face softened with practiced sympathy. Well, there are treatments. My phone buzzed. A text from Miles. Missing you? Dinner tonight? Another buzz? An unknown number. Thought you should see this too. Attached was a photo of Miles leaving a jewelry store last week, carrying a distinctive blue box, the same day he'd told me he was in Chicago for work. Scarlett? Jenna emerged in a sleek silk gown. You look pale. Are you okay? Just hungry. I stood up, gathering my purse. I need some air. Maybe grab a sandwich. But we have 3 more dresses. I'll be quick. I was already moving toward the door. That one's perfect anyway. You should get it. Outside, I leaned against the building's cool stone facade. The jewelry store was only 2 blocks away. My feet carried me there before I could think better of it. The saleswoman smiled as I entered. Welcome to Tiffany's. How can I help you today? I was wondering about a purchase my husband made last week. I pulled up the photo on my phone. This would have been Thursday around 2. Her smile brightened with recognition. Oh yes, Mr. Harrison. Such a lovely choice for his wife's birthday. The sapphire pendant was exquisite. My birthday was in December. It was April. Thank you. I turned to leave, then paused. Did he happen to mention his wife's name? Clara, I believe. He was very specific about the engraving. The bell above the door chimed as another customer entered. I barely registered Diane's voice calling my name as I pushed past her. Scarlett, what are you doing here? She grabbed my arm. Jenna's in tears thinking she upset you. I yanked free. Did you know? Know what? About Clara. The name felt like glass in my mouth. About your grandchild. Diane's face went blank. What grandchild? Scarlett, you're not making sense. The one Miles had with his mistress. I pulled out the first photograph. The one he's been hiding while telling me we can't have children. That grandchild. She stared at the photo, her perfectly manicured hand flying to her throat. There must be some mistake. Miles would never. He did. He does. And he just bought his other family a sapphire pendant while telling me he was in Chicago. Diane's face hardened. We should discuss this privately. Not here, not now. Jenna's wedding. Right. I laughed, the sound sharp enough to make a passing couple stare. Heaven forbid we disturb the perfect family image. I'll just keep pretending while your son builds his other family on the side. Scarlett, tell Jenna I'm sorry. I'll call her later. I started walking, not caring where. Oh, and Diane, congratulations on your grandchild. I hear he has Miles's eyes. Behind me, I heard the boutique's door open again, Jenna's voice calling out. But I kept walking, each step taking me further from the life I thought I had, closer to the revenge I now craved. Miles's car idled outside the Victorian townhouse, its blue paint gleaming in the streetlights. I killed my headlights and watched him climb the steps, carrying takeout bags and what looked like a stuffed animal. The perfect husband, just at the wrong address. My phone lit up. Jenna again. 12 missed calls since I'd left the bridal shop. I switched it off. The townhouse's warm light spilled onto the sidewalk, creating shadow plays through gauzy curtains. A woman's silhouette, Clara, appeared, taking the bags. Then Miles lifted something from her arms. The baby. His son. I grabbed my camera, zooming in as Miles cradled the child. The tenderness in his expression made my stomach turn. 8 years of marriage, and I'd never seen him look at anything that way. A text notification broke my concentration. Following your husband too? We should talk. See. I scanned the street but saw no one. Another message appeared. Coffee shop across the street. I'm in the back booth. The cafe was nearly empty. A woman in a charcoal blazer sat alone, her red hair swept into a sleek ponytail. She looked up as I approached, gesturing to the seat across from her. Catherine Morris, she said. I'm Miles's financial advisor. She slid a folder across the table. Or rather I was, until I noticed some irregularities. I opened the folder. Bank statements, property records, insurance policies. Why are you showing me this? Because your husband's been embezzling from his company to support his other family. Catherine's smile was sharp. And I have proof he's been doing it through accounts in your name. The room tilted slightly. That's impossible, Of course you didn't, but your signature's on everything. She tapped the documents. Excellent forgeries. The FBI would be very interested. You sent the photographs? Miles cost me my job when I confronted him. She sipped her coffee. Consider this professional courtesy. Through the window, I could see Miles leaving the townhouse. He checked his watch, probably thinking up tonight's excuse. Why didn't you go to the authorities? Same reason you haven't confronted him yet. Catherine gathered her things. Sometimes revenge is better served slowly. After she left, I studied the documents. Joint accounts I'd never seen. Investment properties purchased in my name. A trust fund for his son, all funded with stolen money, all tied to me. My phone buzzed again when I turned it back on. Miles. Home soon. Made reservations at Giovanni's. Wear that black dress I love. I thought of all the nights I'd worn that dress, thinking he was looking at me the way he'd just looked at his son. All the times I'd believed his lies about working late, about our future, about us. The cafe door chimed. I looked up to see Clara entering, a baby carrier in one hand. She ordered, then scanned for a seat. Our eyes met. For a moment, we just stared at each other. The wife and the mistress, both pawns in Miles's game. Then something shifted in her expression. Recognition. She walked over slowly, realization dawning on her face. You're her, aren't you? The business partner he mentioned? Business partner? The laugh that escaped me sounded foreign. Is that what he calls me? Clara sank into Catherine's vacant seat, her face draining of color. He said he was divorced, that his ex-wife was trying to ruin him financially. We're not divorced. I slid the photograph across the table. Someone sent me this yesterday. She stared at it, then at me. The baby stirred in his carrier, making soft noises. Miles's son. I'm going to be sick, Clara whispered. Join the club. I pushed the folder toward her. But first, you should see what else your boyfriend's been up to. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Outside, the streetlights flickered on, casting shadows across documents that would destroy the man we'd both loved, the man who'd played us both for fools. My phone lit up one final time. Miles. Almost home. Can't wait to see you. I looked at Clara, at the evidence between us, at the baby who shared his father's eyes. What do you say we give him a surprise instead? Jenna's engagement party hummed with fake laughter and expensive champagne. I stood in the corner of our grandparents' garden, watching Miles charm the crowd. He'd always been good at that, making people believe whatever version of himself he wanted them to see. You've been avoiding my calls. Jenna appeared beside me, radiant in her cream cocktail dress. What happened at the boutique? Nothing. I drained my champagne. Just feeling under the weather. Liar. She linked her arm through mine. You're doing that thing with your jaw, like when we were kids and you were keeping secrets to protect me. Across the garden, Miles caught my eye and raised his glass. Next to him, Diane was showing off photos on her phone, probably pictures of her secret grandson. Some things are better left unsaid, I managed, especially during your engagement party. Scarlett. Jenna's grip tightened. You're scaring me. Before I could respond, Oliver approached with 2 fresh glasses. Mind if I borrow the bride's sister for a moment? Jenna hesitated, then kissed my cheek. This conversation isn't over. Oliver waited until she was out of earshot. I received some concerning information about Miles's accounts at work. My hand froze mid-sip. What kind of information? The kind that could land him, and potentially you, in federal prison. He lowered his voice. Someone's been systematically moving company funds through shell corporations. Your signature's all over the paperwork. I never signed anything. I know. Oliver's eyes were kind but serious. That's why I came to you first. The board meets Monday to discuss pressing charges. The party's chatter became white noise. Through the crowd, I watched Miles lift someone's baby, cooing and playing the devoted uncle. The sight made me physically ill. How long have you known? I asked. About the money? 3 days? About Clara? Oliver sighed. I saw them last month at that new French place downtown. Didn't know how to tell you. My grandmother's prized roses blurred as tears threatened. I blinked them back. I need air. I slipped through the French doors into the quiet of the house. Family photos lined the hallway. Jenna and me as children, our grandparents at their 50th anniversary, Miles and me on our wedding day. All lies in gilded frames. There you are. Miles's voice behind me. I've barely seen you all evening. I didn't turn around. Busy night. His hands settled on my shoulders, familiar and foreign at once. You seem tense. Everything okay? How's your son? His hands stilled. The grandfather clock in the foyer ticked 7 endless seconds before he spoke. What are you talking about? I shrugged off his touch and faced him. The baby in the photo, the one with your eyes, the one you've been supporting with stolen money in my name. Color drained from his face. Scarlett, don't. I held up my hand. The FBI is investigating the embezzlement. Oliver knows everything. I can explain. Can you explain the forgeries, the shell corporations? How about explaining to Clara that she's not your only wife? His expression shifted from shock to calculation. I recognized it now. The mask adjusting, the lies assembling. Whatever you think you know, he started. I know enough. Through the window, I could see Jenna searching the crowd for me. You have until Monday to confess everything to the board. After that, I'm turning over all the evidence. You'd really send me to prison? You were willing to send me there to protect your lies. I smiled, cold and sharp. Funny how karma works. The door opened. Jenna poked her head in. There you are. Come on, it's time for the toast. Miles reached for my arm. I stepped back. Coming, sis. Miles was just telling me how excited he is to give his speech. Outside, guests gathered around the makeshift stage. Diane beamed as Miles took the microphone, ever the proud mother. I watched my sister's face glow with happiness, knowing this might be her last moment of believing in perfect families and happy endings. My phone vibrated. A text from Clara. Ready when you are. I looked at Miles, raising his glass to love and loyalty, and typed back 2 words. Tomorrow morning. The morning after the engagement party, I found Miles in his home office, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. He didn't look up when I entered. Rough night? I leaned against the doorframe. Or just busy covering your tracks. His fingers paused over the keyboard. I was going to tell you. Before or after I went to prison for your crimes? It's complicated. He rubbed his face, finally meeting my eyes. The money, it started small. Just enough to help Clara with the baby. Then things spiraled. Like your lies? A notification pinged on his computer. I glimpsed Clara's name in the email subject line before he minimized it. I loved you, he said. I still do. Enough to forge my signature? To steal my future along with the company's money? He stood, reaching for me. Let me fix this. I'll confess everything to the board, take full responsibility. The way you took responsibility for your son. The words tasted like acid. Or the way you took responsibility for our fertility issues. His phone buzzed. Clara's face flashed on the screen before he silenced it. She's waiting for you, isn't she? I moved closer, picking up a framed photo from his desk, us on our honeymoon. Does she know you're married? That you've been lying to both of us? Scarlett, please. I talked to Catherine Morris. The color drained from his face. What did she tell you? Everything. I set the frame down carefully, including where the rest of the money went, the offshore accounts, the property in the Caymans. His expression hardened. Catherine's bitter about being fired. She'll say anything. To protect herself from prosecution, I pulled out my phone, showing him the recording app. The way you tried to protect yourself by making me your fall guy? You're recording this? Insurance. I stopped the recording. In case you try to pin everything on me when the FBI comes knocking. His laugh was ugly. You wouldn't dare. Think about Jenna's wedding, your reputation, our families. Our families! The vase of fresh flowers on his desk caught my eye, identical to the ones I'd seen at Clara's townhouse. You mean like the family you built on the side? Or the one you've been lying to for years? The front door chimed. Miles went rigid. Expecting someone? I asked sweetly. Clara's voice carried up the stairs. Miles, are you home? His eyes widened in panic. Scarlett, wait. I brushed past him, heading for the stairs. Behind me, papers scattered as Miles scrambled to follow. Clara stood in our foyer, holding their son. She froze when she saw me. Perfect timing, I said. We were just discussing Miles's creative accounting. What's going on? Clara's eyes darted between us. Miles? Remember those documents I showed you? I descended the stairs slowly. About the money he's been stealing? Scarlett, stop! Miles grabbed my arm. I yanked free. Tell her, Miles. Tell her about your wife while you're explaining where all that money really went. Clara's face crumpled. Wife? 8 years next month? I held up my left hand, wedding ring glinting. Though I suppose that's about to change. The baby started crying. The sound echoed off the high ceilings, mixing with Clara's shocked inhale and Miles's desperate attempts at damage control. I can explain everything, he started. Save it for the FBI. I reached the bottom step. They'll be here soon enough. Clara backed toward the door, clutching her son. You're married? All this time? Clara, please. Miles moved to follow her. Don't. My voice could have frozen hell. Let her go. You've done enough damage. The door slammed behind Clara. Through the window, I watched her hurry to her car, tears streaming down her face. Miles slumped against the wall. You've ruined everything. No. I headed for the door myself. You did that all on your own. Where are you going? I paused, hand on the doorknob. To tell my sister the truth, then to the FBI. I looked back at him, this stranger I'd loved for 8 years. I suggest you call a lawyer. The door closed behind me with a final click. In my purse, my phone buzzed with a text from Oliver. Board meeting moved up. Tomorrow morning. I smiled as I typed my response. Perfect. The boardroom felt like a tomb. 12 pairs of eyes watched me take my seat, their expressions ranging from pity to suspicion. Miles sat opposite me, flanked by two lawyers I'd never seen before. Oliver cleared his throat. Before we begin, Mrs. Harrison, are you sure you don't want legal representation? I have everything I need. I placed my folder on the polished table. Miles's lawyer spoke first. My client wishes to make a statement. Actually, I cut in. I'd like to go first. The door opened. Diane swept in, her designer suit immaculate, her smile razor sharp. I hope I'm not interrupting. My stomach dropped. Miles straightened, confidence returning to his posture. Mother, this is a closed meeting. Oh, but I'm here as a major shareholder. She took a seat next to Miles, and as someone with relevant information about these accusations. I opened my folder, hands steady despite the cold sweat breaking out along my spine. I have documentation of every fraudulent transaction. You mean the transactions you authorized? Diane slid a stack of papers across the table. We found these in your home office last night. The board members murmured as they examined the documents. My signature, perfect forgeries, on everything from wire transfers to offshore account applications. That's not my signature. Our handwriting expert disagrees. Miles's lawyer smiled, as does the notary who witnessed several of these signatures. My phone vibrated. A text from Clara. He threatened to take my son. I'm sorry. The room tilted slightly. Of course, Miles must have gotten to her, used their child as leverage. If you'll look at the evidence I've prepared, I started. The evidence you fabricated to frame my son? Diane's voice could have frozen flame. After embezzling company funds to support your gambling addiction? Gambling addiction? I looked at Oliver, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. That's ridiculous. We have casino receipts. Miles spoke softly, regretfully. And witnesses who'll testify about your problems. The board members exchanged glances. I recognized the shift in the room, the moment they decided I was the villain in this story. Oliver, I pleaded, you know this isn't true. I know you've been under tremendous pressure. His words were careful, rehearsed. The fertility treatments, the marriage counseling. Marriage counseling? Another piece clicked into place. The therapist Miles had insisted on last year. More witnesses for his manufactured narrative. Scarlett, Miles reached across the table. Please, let us help you. I jerked away from his touch. Don't. The company won't press charges, his lawyer offered, provided you agree to treatment and sign over your shares to Mrs. Harrison Sr. The trap snapped shut. They'd planned this perfectly, using my own revenge plot against me. Every piece of evidence I'd gathered had a counter-narrative that painted me as unstable, desperate, dangerous. And if I refuse, then we'll have no choice but to involve the authorities. Diane's smile never wavered. Think of your sister's wedding. The scandal would be unfortunate. My phone buzzed again. Jenna, why is Miles's mom telling everyone you're having a breakdown? The walls closed in. Every path forward led to destruction, mine or others I loved. Miles had outplayed me, using my own protective instincts as weapons. I need air. I stood, papers scattering. 5 minutes. Nobody stopped me as I fled the room. In the hallway, I leaned against the wall, gasping. My phone kept buzzing. Jenna, Clara, unknown numbers probably belonging to reporters Miles had already primed with his version of events. The emergency exit beckoned. I could run, start over somewhere new. But that would mean leaving Jenna vulnerable, abandoning Clara to Miles's manipulation, proving every lie they'd told about me. The boardroom door opened. Oliver stepped out. They're ready for your decision. I straightened, smoothing my jacket. 8 years of marriage had taught me everything about Miles, including how to lie convincingly. Actually, I said, I have one more piece of evidence to present. I pulled out my phone, fingers hovering over Catherine Morris's number. Miles wasn't the only one who could plan ahead. Sometimes revenge required losing everything to win. Shall we? I gestured to the door, my smile as sharp as Diane's. Time to show them how dangerous a cornered woman could be. I placed my phone on the boardroom table. Speaker mode activated. Catherine, you're on with the board of directors. Miles's smirk faltered. Diane's hand tightened on her son's shoulder. Ms. Morris, Oliver leaned forward. You were terminated for making unfounded accusations. Actually, Catherine's voice filled the room. I was fired for discovering something interesting about the Harrison family trust. The door opened. Clara walked in, holding her son. Behind her, 2 FBI agents followed. What is this? Diane stood, but one agent gestured for her to remain seated. The trust fund was clever, I said, watching Miles' face drain of color. Setting it up in your mother's name, using it to launder company money. Did you really think I wouldn't find the connection? You have no proof, Miles started. But I do. Clara stepped forward. Everything's in the nursery camera footage, including Miles's confession about the embezzlement, the fake signatures, all of it. Miles lunged for his phone. The second FBI agent intercepted him. The nanny cam? Miles whispered. You recorded every visit. Clara's voice shook. Every lie you told about being single, about the money being yours, about Scarlett being your unstable business partner who was trying to steal from the company. Diane's perfectly maintained facade cracked. You stupid boy. What have you done? What you taught him to do. I opened another folder. Protect the family name at any cost, even if it meant destroying others. The board members murmured as copies of bank statements circulated. The real ones this time, showing the complex web of transactions between the company, the trust, and Miles' secret accounts. Mrs. Harrison Sr., one FBI agent stepped forward. We have some questions about your role in these transactions. Diane's face hardened. I want my lawyer. Of course. The agent smiled. We can discuss the offshore accounts at the federal building. Miles stood, desperation rolling off him in waves. Scarlett, please, think about what this will do to everyone, to Jenna's wedding. Don't you dare use my sister. I kept my voice level. You did this, all of it. The lies, the theft, the manipulation, and now you'll face the consequences. The gambling addiction story was particularly creative, Catherine added through the speaker, using Scarlett's fertility clinic visits to create a paper trail of destructive behavior. Almost brilliant, if it hadn't been so easy to disprove. Clara shifted her son to her other hip. I trusted you. We both did. Clara, sweetheart. Miles reached for his child. The baby started crying. The sound cut through the tension like a knife, making everything suddenly brutally real. Mr. Harrison. The first agent stepped between Miles and Clara. You'll need to come with us. You can't do this. Miles looked around wildly. Mother, tell them. But Diane was already being let out, her lawyer on speed dial. The board chairman cleared his throat. Ms. Morris, would you consider returning to your position? We'll need someone to audit the full extent of the damage. Gladly. Catherine's satisfaction was audible. I'll be in tomorrow morning. I gathered my things as the agents read Miles his rights. Clara caught my arm before I could leave. I'm sorry I didn't come forward sooner. She bounced her fussing son. When he threatened custody, you protected your child. I touched the baby's soft cheek. That's what matters now. Miles called out as they led him past. Scarlett, wait. Goodbye, Miles. I didn't turn around. Give my regards to your mother. You'll probably be sharing a lawyer. Outside, reporters had already gathered. Oliver appeared at my side. The company will release a statement supporting you fully. He handed me a business card. This is my personal attorney, user for the divorce. My phone buzzed. Jenna, just saw the news. Coming over now. Love you. I stepped into the sunlight, cameras flashing. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe freely. Sometimes revenge wasn't about destroying someone else. It was about refusing to let them destroy you. Clara followed, shielding her son from the cameras. We shared a look of understanding. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But today, truth had won. And that was enough. The courthouse steps gleamed in the morning sun as I signed the final divorce papers. My lawyer tucked them into her briefcase while I watched Miles being led to a waiting prison transport vehicle, his designer suit replaced by orange coveralls. 5 years, Catherine said, appearing beside me, plus full restitution. Diane got 3. I handed her an envelope. The board approved your reinstatement bonus. Keep it, she smiled. Watching the Harrisons fall was payment enough. Across the plaza, Clara waited with her son. The baby wore a blue romper I'd bought him last week. Some might call it strange, forming a friendship with your ex-husband's mistress. But shared wounds create unexpected bonds. Ready? Jenna linked her arm through mine. Her engagement ring caught the light, a simple band now. The original Harrison family diamond returned along with other ill-gotten gifts. Almost. I approached Clara and the baby. Meeting the realtor at 11? She nodded. The townhouse showing. You're still sure about this? The investment is solid. I touched the baby's cheek. And everyone deserves a fresh start. My phone buzzed. Oliver, probably with more questions about the company restructuring. I'd answer later. Some moments deserved undivided attention. You never told me, Clara said quietly. Who sent that first photograph? I watched Miles disappear into the transport van. Does it matter? I suppose not. She adjusted the baby's hat. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. Jenna called from her car. We'll be late for the dress fitting. The wedding was smaller now, reimagined without the Harrison fortune. Better that way. Built on truth rather than carefully constructed lies. You know, Clara said, he asked about you, during the sentencing. And? He said he was sorry, that he never meant to get caught? I touched the spot where my wedding ring used to sit. Some apologies come too late. The baby reached for me, his father's green eyes bright with innocent trust. I lifted him, breathing in that sweet powder smell. In another life, he might have been my stepson. In this one, he was something more complicated, a reminder that love and betrayal often wear the same face. The trust fund is set up, I told Clara. Catherine will manage it until he's 18. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. I handed the baby back. Not for Miles. For him. My phone buzzed again. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for the truth. D. I deleted it without responding. Diane's attempts at redemption from prison held no interest for me. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. Scarlett, Jenna honked her horn. The seamstress is waiting. I hugged Clara goodbye, breathing in the future rather than the past. The plaza was filling with people, lawyers, clients, other lives in transition. None of them knew they were standing on the exact spot where I'd received that first photograph, the moment that shattered my world and set me free. Coming, sis. I joined Jenna in her car, leaving Miles in his transport van behind. Through the rearview mirror, I watched Clara heading toward the realtor's office, toward her fresh start. You know what Grandma used to say? Jenna pulled into traffic. Sometimes the best revenge is living well. I thought of Miles in his prison cell, of Diane's empty mansion, of the life I'd almost settled for. Grandma was wrong. Oh? The best revenge is living truthfully. I closed my eyes, feeling the sun on my face. Everything else is just karma. Jenna laughed, the sound pure and free of shadows. Ahead, the city stretched out like a blank page, waiting to be written. Behind us, the courthouse shrank in the mirror, taking with it 8 years of lies and one spectacular act of revenge. My phone buzzed one last time. Catherine, board meeting tomorrow. Ready to take over as CEO? I smiled, thinking of Miles's face when the vote results would reach his cell. Some revenge plots take years to unfold. The best ones never really end. Ready, I typed back, and meant it.
I stared at my phone, dumbfounded by Kevin's invitation. It had been years since we last spoke, our lives diverging after college. While his carefree spirit beckoned adventure, my world revolved around spreadsheets and the monotonous rhythm of corporate life. I don't know, Kev, I said hesitantly. A camping trip seems exactly what you need, he interrupted. When was the last time you stepped out of that office, Harper? His words struck a chord. Between caring for my ailing father and the endless grind at work, I couldn't remember the last time I'd done something for myself. You've got a point, I conceded, but I can't just drop everything. Yes, you can, he insisted. One weekend, Harper. That's all I'm asking. We'll hike, tell stories by the fire, and you can rediscover that spark you've been missing. My practical side battled with the yearning for adventure. With a deep breath, I made a decision that would alter the course of my life forever. All right, I'm in. The following Saturday, I found myself at a coffee shop surrounded by an eclectic group of Kevin's friends. As I sipped my latte, trying to appear nonchalant, Kevin approached with a tall, rugged-looking man in tow. "Harper, this is Miles," Kevin announced, "our resident outdoorsman and guide for the weekend." Miles extended a calloused hand, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "Pleasure to meet you. Kevin tells me you're an accountant?" I nodded, suddenly self-conscious about my corporate attire amidst their casual hiking gear. "Well, we'll have to toughen you up," Miles said with a wink. "The great outdoors doesn't care about numbers." His teasing put me at ease, and I found myself laughing alongside the others. As we set off for the trailhead, I couldn't shake the feeling that this trip would be more than just a weekend escape. The hike proved more challenging than I anticipated, but Miles stayed by my side, offering encouragement and tips. With each step, the weight of my responsibilities seemed to lighten. "First time hiking, Harper?" he asked, noticing my labored breaths. "Is it that obvious?" I replied, trying to mask my struggle. Miles chuckled. "Don't worry, we all started somewhere. Just take it at your own pace." As the day progressed, I found myself opening up to Miles about my life, the endless hours at the office, caring for my father, and the constant feeling of being trapped. He listened intently, understanding the burdens I carried. That night, huddled around the campfire, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't experienced in years. Miles's stories of his adventures captivated me, painting vivid pictures of landscapes I'd only dreamed of seeing. "Why don't you ever travel, Harper?" he asked, his gaze piercing through the flickering flames. I shrugged, unsure of how to articulate the weight of my responsibilities. Too much to leave behind, I guess. Miles nodded, understanding without judgment. In that moment, I caught a glimpse of a different life, one filled with freedom and possibility. The next morning, I awoke in the tent, my body aching but my spirit renewed. As I emerged, Miles was already brewing coffee over the campfire. "Morning, Harper," he greeted with a warm smile. "Ready for another adventure?" I took a deep breath, savoring the crisp mountain air. As ready as I'll ever be. And for the first time in years, I truly meant it. The morning after our camping trip, I found myself back at the coffee shop, surrounded by Kevin's friends. The air buzzed with excitement as everyone recounted their favorite moments from the weekend. "Did you see the look on Harper's face when she reached the summit?" Kevin teased, nudging me playfully. "I thought she was going to keel over." I rolled my eyes, but couldn't help grinning. "Hey, cut me some slack. It was my first real hike." "You did great, Harper," Miles chimed in, his voice sending a flutter through my chest. "Not everyone takes to the outdoors like a natural." Our eyes met, and for a moment it felt like we were the only two people in the room. Kevin cleared his throat, snapping us back to reality. "So who's up for another adventure next month?" he asked, rubbing his hands together mischievously. The group erupted in a chorus of cheers and laughter, but I stayed silent, suddenly aware of the weight of my responsibilities waiting for me at home. Miles must have noticed my hesitation. "You know, Harper, you don't have to decide right away," he said gently. "Just think about it." I nodded, grateful for his understanding. As the group dispersed, Miles lingered behind. "I meant what I said out there," he murmured. "You were incredible this weekend. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Before I could respond, he pulled me into a warm embrace, his rugged scent enveloping me. My heart raced as we parted, his touch igniting a spark I thought had long extinguished. "See you around, Harper," he said with a wink, disappearing into the bustling city streets. Over the next few months, our camping trips became a regular escape from the monotony of daily life. With each adventure, Miles and I grew closer, our bond strengthened by the shared challenges and triumphs of the great outdoors. One evening, as we sat around the crackling campfire, Miles turned to me with a contemplative expression. "Have you ever thought about doing something different with your life?" he asked, his eyes reflecting the dancing flames. I shrugged, unsure of how to respond. "Like what?" "I don't know," he mused. "Traveling, maybe? Seeing the world beyond those spreadsheets and cubicles?" His words struck a chord within me, awakening a yearning I'd long suppressed. Before I could overthink it, the words tumbled out. "I'd love that, Miles, but with my dad's health and my job." I trailed off, the weight of my responsibilities crashing down once again. Miles reached out, taking my hand in his calloused grip. "Harper, you can't live your life for other people. You deserve to be happy too." His words resonated deeply, and in that moment, I knew something had to change. I couldn't continue sacrificing my dreams for the sake of others' expectations. "You're right," I said, my voice trembling with a newfound determination. "I can't keep living like this." Miles smiled, his eyes shining with pride. "That's my girl." From that night on, a shift occurred within me. I started making plans, exploring options, and dreaming of a life beyond the confines of my routine. And through it all, Miles remained by my side, unwavering in his support and belief in me. Little did I know the path I was embarking on would lead me down a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, testing the very limits of my resilience and resolve. The crisp mountain air filled my lungs as our group embarked on another hiking adventure. Miles led the way, his confident strides guiding us deeper into the wilderness. "All right, everyone, we'll take the scenic route today," he announced, adjusting his backpack. "It's a bit more challenging, but the views are worth it." I exchanged a nervous glance with Kevin, who just shrugged and grinned. "You heard the man. Let's do this." As we trekked along the winding trail, I couldn't help but steal glances at Miles. The way he navigated the terrain with such ease and grace was captivating. "Need a hand?" he asked, slowing his pace to fall in step beside me. I shook my head, determined to prove myself. "I've got this." Miles chuckled, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "Stubborn as always. I like that about you, Harper." His words sent a flutter through my chest, and I had to force myself to keep my focus on the trail ahead. After a grueling ascent, we finally reached a breathtaking overlook. Miles gestured for me to join him at the edge, and I gasped at the panoramic view that stretched out before us. "Incredible, isn't it?" he murmured, his voice low and intimate. I nodded, words failing me in the face of such natural beauty. In that moment, it felt like Miles and I were the only two people in the world. As the others settled down for a well-deserved break, Miles turned to me with a mischievous grin. "Up for a little detour?" he asked, his eyes sparkling with adventure. Before I could respond, he grabbed my hand and led me down a narrow path, veering off the main trail. My heart raced with a mixture of excitement and apprehension, but I trusted Miles implicitly. After a short hike, we emerged into a secluded clearing, a pristine waterfall cascading into a crystal-clear pool. "Miles, this is—" I trailed off, unable to find the words to describe the breathtaking scene before us. He simply smiled, that familiar twinkle in his eye. "I thought you might like it." Without hesitation, Miles began stripping off his hiking gear, and I averted my gaze, suddenly flustered. "What are you doing?" I asked, my cheeks flushing. "Going for a swim," he replied nonchalantly. "Care to join me?" Before I could protest, he dove gracefully into the pool, resurfacing with a playful splash. I couldn't help but laugh at his carefree spirit. "Come on, Harper," he called out. "Live a little." Biting my lip, I weighed my options. Part of me wanted to cling to the safety of my comfort zone, but a larger part yearned for the freedom and spontaneity that Miles embodied. With a deep breath, I stripped down to my undergarments and slipped into the cool, refreshing water. Miles beamed, pulling me into an embrace that sent shivers down my spine. "That's my girl," he murmured, his lips dangerously close to mine. In that moment, surrounded by nature's untamed beauty, I felt more alive than I had in years. Miles had awoken a part of me I thought had long been extinguished, a thirst for adventure, for living life to the fullest. As we floated together in the tranquil pool, our bodies intertwined, I knew that my life would never be the same again. Miles had shown me a world beyond the confines of my routine, and I was determined to embrace it, no matter the cost. Little did I know, the path I had chosen would lead me down a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, testing the very limits of my resilience and resolve. As the sun dipped below the horizon, our group gathered around the crackling campfire, the dancing flames casting flickering shadows across our faces. The air was thick with the scent of wood smoke and camaraderie. "All right, who's got a good story to share?" Kevin asked, rubbing his hands together in anticipation. A chorus of laughter and protests erupted, but Miles remained silent, his gaze fixed on the flames. I studied his profile, mesmerized by the way the firelight played across his rugged features. "What about you, Harper?" he said suddenly, turning to me with a warm smile. "I'm sure you've got some tales from the corporate world." I shrugged self-consciously. "I don't know, Miles. My life isn't exactly the stuff of adventure novels." He leaned closer, his eyes holding a hint of mischief. Come on, there has to be something interesting in all those spreadsheets. Faced with his playful prodding, I found myself recounting a particularly harrowing tax season, complete with all-nighters and office drama. To my surprise, the group was enraptured, hanging on my every word. As the laughter died down, Miles caught my eye, a silent understanding passing between us. In that moment, I realized how much I'd been missing out on, the simple pleasures of good company and shared experiences. Your turn, Miles, I challenged, emboldened by the warmth of the fire and the camaraderie surrounding us. He grinned, that familiar twinkle in his eye. All right, but brace yourselves, this one's a doozy. Miles launched into a captivating tale of his solo trek through the Himalayas, his words painting vivid pictures of treacherous mountain passes and breathtaking vistas. As he spoke, I found myself leaning in, hanging on his every word, desperate to soak up every detail of his adventures. When he finished, the group erupted in a chorus of appreciative cheers and applause. But Miles's gaze was fixed on me, his eyes shining with a depth of emotion that sent my heart racing. Why don't you ever travel, Harper? He asked, his voice low and intimate. I hesitated, suddenly aware of the weight of my responsibilities. Responsibilities, I guess. Too much to leave behind. Miles nodded, his expression understanding. I get it, but you can't let life pass you by. His words struck a chord within me, awakening a yearning I'd long suppressed. Before I could respond, Kevin chimed in, oblivious to the moment he'd interrupted. All right, enough with the heavy stuff, he said, clapping his hands together. Who's up for some ghost stories? The group erupted in a chorus of laughter and excited chatter, but Miles and I remained locked in our own private moment, a silent understanding passing between us. As the night wore on, I found myself gravitating closer to Miles, drawn in by his warmth and charisma. We shared stories and laughs, our connection deepening with every passing moment. When the fire finally dwindled to embers, Miles stood, offering me his hand. Take a walk with me? Without hesitation, I accepted, allowing him to lead me away from the camp and into the embrace of the starry night. We strolled in comfortable silence, our shoulders brushing with every step. Finally, Miles stopped, turning to face me. Harper, His voice trailed off, but his eyes spoke volumes, conveying a depth of emotion that left me breathless. Before I could respond, he pulled me into a searing kiss, his lips claiming mine with a fierce intensity. In that moment, all my doubts and fears melted away, replaced by a burning desire that consumed me from the inside out. When we finally broke apart, gasping for air, Miles rested his forehead against mine. You're incredible, Harper, he murmured, his words sending shivers down my spine. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. As we made our way back to camp, our fingers intertwined, I knew that my life had been forever changed. Miles had awakened a fire within me, a thirst for adventure and passion that I could no longer ignore. Little did I know, the path I had chosen would lead me down a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, testing the very limits of my resilience and resolve. I awoke to the gentle rustle of the tent fabric, the crisp morning air seeping in. As I blinked away the remnants of sleep, the memories of the previous night came flooding back. Miles's kiss, the intensity of his embrace, the way he had ignited a fire within me. Carefully I unzipped the tent flap, squinting against the bright morning sun. Miles was already up, tending to the campfire, his movements fluid and confident. He glanced up as I emerged, a warm smile spreading across his rugged features. Morning, sleepyhead, he greeted, his voice rich and inviting. Coffee's almost ready. I nodded, still feeling a bit dazed from the events of the night before. As I approached the fire, Miles handed me a steaming mug, his fingers brushing against mine in a simple yet electrifying touch. Thanks, I murmured, taking a tentative sip and savoring the rich, earthy flavor. Miles studied me for a moment, his eyes sparkling with amusement. You look like you could use some more rest. Rough night? A flush crept up my cheeks as I recalled the passionate embrace we had shared under the stars. You could say that. He chuckled, that familiar twinkle in his eye sending butterflies fluttering through my stomach. Well, I hope you're ready for another adventure today. I've got something special planned. I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Oh, and what might that be? Miles simply grinned, that mischievous glint in his eye. It's a surprise, but trust me, you're going to love it. As we set off on the day's hike, I couldn't help but steal glances at Miles, my mind replaying the events of the previous night. The way he had held me, kissed me, it was as if he had awoken a part of me that had been dormant for far too long. Miles seemed to sense my distraction, reaching out to give my hand a gentle squeeze. "You okay over there?" I nodded, offering him a reassuring smile. "Yeah, just taking it all in." He grinned, that infectious enthusiasm lighting up his face. "Well, get ready, because we're almost there." As we rounded a bend in the trail, a breathtaking sight came into view. A secluded waterfall cascading into a crystal-clear pool, surrounded by lush foliage and towering peaks. "Miles, this is—" I trailed off, at a loss for words. He simply smiled, that familiar twinkle in his eye. "I knew you'd like it." Without hesitation, he began stripping off his hiking gear, and I couldn't help but admire the toned lines of his body. When he caught me staring, he winked playfully. "Care to join me for a dip?" I bit my lip, suddenly self-conscious. But the allure of the cool, inviting water and the prospect of being close to Miles again was too strong to resist. Slowly, I peeled off my own layers, trying to ignore the way Miles's gaze raked over my exposed skin. When we were both down to our undergarments, he extended his hand, his eyes burning with an intensity that set my heart racing. "Trust me," he murmured, his voice low and seductive. I placed my hand in his, allowing him to lead me into the refreshing embrace of the pool. As the water enveloped us, Miles pulled me close, his muscular arms wrapping around me in a possessive embrace. "You're incredible, Harper," he whispered, his lips brushing against my ear. "Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." In that moment, surrounded by nature's untamed beauty and cradled in Miles's strong embrace, I felt more alive than I ever had before. He had awakened a fire within me, a thirst for adventure and passion that I could no longer ignore. As our bodies intertwined beneath the cascading waterfall, I surrendered myself to the moment, allowing the rush of desire to consume me. Miles claimed my lips in a searing kiss, his touch igniting a blaze of emotions that threatened to consume us both. Little did I know that the path I had chosen would lead me down a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, testing the very limits of my resilience and resolve. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Only the intensity of our connection, the promise of a future filled with passion and adventure. The waterfall's gentle roar filled my ears as I clung to Miles, our bodies intertwined beneath the cascading waters. His strong arms encircled me, our kiss deepening with a fierce intensity that left me breathless. When we finally broke apart, gasping for air, Miles rested his forehead against mine, his eyes shining with a depth of emotion that sent shivers down my spine. "Harper," he murmured, his voice thick with desire. "I've never felt this way about anyone before." I traced the sharp line of his jaw, marveling at the way the water droplets clung to his tanned skin. "Neither have I." He captured my hand in his, pressing a tender kiss to my palm. "Stay with me, Harper. Let's make this adventure last forever." My heart raced at the implications of his words, the promise of a future filled with passion and freedom. Before I could respond, he silenced me with another searing kiss, his touch igniting a fire within me that threatened to consume us both. From that moment on, our bond only deepened, forged in the crucible of our shared experiences and the intensity of our connection. Miles showed me a world beyond the confines of my routine, a life filled with adventure and possibility. A year later, as we stood hand in hand beneath the same waterfall where our love had blossomed, Miles dropped to one knee, his eyes shining with determination. "Harper," he began, his voice steady despite the tremor of emotion, "you've shown me what it means to truly live, to embrace every moment and cherish the beauty in this world. You've awakened a fire within me that I never knew existed." He reached into his pocket, producing a simple yet elegant ring. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Of embarking on the greatest adventure of all, a life together?" Tears of joy streamed down my cheeks as I nodded, rendered speechless by the depth of his love and devotion. Miles slipped the ring onto my finger, sealing our promise with a kiss that set my soul ablaze. Our wedding was a simple yet beautiful affair, a celebration of our love and the unbreakable bond we had forged. As we exchanged vows beneath the open sky, surrounded by the majestic peaks that had witnessed the blossoming of our romance, I knew that I had found my forever. The years that followed were filled with adventure and passion, our love only growing stronger with each challenge we faced together. We traveled the world, explored hidden corners of the globe, and cherished every moment of our shared journey. But eventually the responsibilities of life caught up with us. When my father's health began to decline, Miles didn't hesitate to support my decision to move him into our home and become his caretaker. "Your family is my family, Harper," he assured me, his eyes shining with unwavering devotion. "We'll get through this together." Little did I know that those words would be put to the ultimate test, as the path we had chosen led us down a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, testing the very limits of our resilience and resolve. 4 years after our fairy tale wedding, the harsh realities of life began to catch up with us. My father's health had taken a turn for the worse, and the decision to move him into our home weighed heavily on both of us. "Are you sure about this, Harper?" Miles asked, his brow furrowed with concern. "It's a huge responsibility." I nodded, my resolve unwavering. "He's my dad, Miles. I have to do this." Miles pulled me into a warm embrace, his strong arms offering reassurance. "You know, I'll be here every step of the way, right? We're in this together." His words brought me comfort, but deep down, I knew the strain this would put on our relationship. Caring for my ailing father would consume much of my time and energy, leaving little room for the adventurous lifestyle we had once enjoyed. True to his word, Miles stepped up to the challenge, helping with my father's care and offering unwavering support. But as the months wore on, the financial burden began to take its toll. "I've been crunching the numbers," I said one evening, my voice laced with worry. "Between Dad's medical expenses and the loss of my income, we're stretching thin." Miles reached across the table, taking my hand in his calloused grip. "We'll figure it out, Harper. Money isn't everything." But the strain was evident in his eyes, a flicker of doubt that he tried to conceal. I knew he was putting on a brave face for my sake, but the cracks were beginning to show. As my father's condition deteriorated, I made the difficult decision to quit my job, devoting myself entirely to his care. Miles supported my choice, but the financial strain only intensified. "I've been picking up extra work," he admitted one night, his voice tinged with exhaustion, "doing some freelance gigs to make ends meet." I studied his weary expression, guilt gnawing at my conscience. "Miles, you shouldn't have to shoulder this burden alone." He forced a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "It's temporary, Harper. We'll get through this, I promise." But as the weeks turned into months, Miles grew increasingly distant, his once vibrant spirit dimming under the weight of our circumstances. I tried to broach the subject, but he would brush me off, insisting everything was fine. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a stack of unpaid bills and notices from creditors that the truth began to unravel. Miles had been hiding a secret from me, a gambling addiction that had spiraled out of control, leaving us drowning in debt. When I finally confronted him, the floodgates opened, and the depth of his deceit came crashing down upon us. "I'm sorry, Harper," he choked out, his eyes brimming with tears. "I never meant for it to go this far." Anger and betrayal coursed through my veins as I realized the extent of his lies. The man I had trusted, the partner I had vowed to spend my life with, had been living a double life, jeopardizing everything we had built together. "How could you, Miles?" I cried, my voice trembling with anguish. "After everything we've been through, how could you do this to us?" His shoulders slumped, defeat etched into every line of his face. "I never asked for this life, Harper. I needed an escape." In that moment, the weight of his betrayal was suffocating, threatening to crush the very foundation of our love. As I looked into his eyes, I saw a stranger, a man consumed by his own demons, willing to sacrifice everything for the thrill of the gamble. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of a twisted trail of deception and heartbreak, a path that would test the very limits of my resilience and resolve, forcing me to confront the harsh reality of the man I had once called my soulmate. The weight of Miles's betrayal hung heavy in the air, suffocating me with each breath. As I stared into his tear-filled eyes, I saw a stranger, a man consumed by his own demons, willing to sacrifice everything we had built together for the thrill of the gamble. "How long?" I asked, my voice trembling with barely contained rage. "How long have you been lying to me?" Miles couldn't meet my gaze, his shoulders slumped in defeat. Too long, he whispered, shame etching lines into his once vibrant face. In that moment, the full extent of his deceit hit me like a physical blow. The man I had trusted, the partner I had vowed to spend my life with, had been living a double life, jeopardizing everything for his addiction. As the shock began to wear off, anger took its place, a white-hot fury that coursed through my veins. "Get out," I spat, my hands balling into fists at my sides. Miles's head snapped up, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Harper, please, let me explain." "Explain what?" I shouted, the dam of emotions finally bursting. "How you've been gambling away our future. How you've been lying to me, day after day, while I poured my heart and soul into this family?" He opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off, the words tumbling out in a torrent of hurt and betrayal. "No, Miles. I don't want to hear it. Not anymore." I took a deep, shuddering breath, steeling my resolve. "I want you out of this house. Tonight." A flicker of defiance flashed in his eyes, but it was quickly extinguished by the weight of his shame. Without a word, he turned and walked out, the sound of the door slamming behind him echoing through the empty silence. In the days that followed, I methodically untangled the web of lies Miles had spun, uncovering the full extent of his gambling debt and the secret life he had been leading. With each new revelation, the man I had loved slipped further away, replaced by a stranger whose actions had shattered my world. It wasn't until I stumbled upon a hidden stash of letters and photographs that the final, devastating truth came to light. Miles had been living a double life, with a secret family and children I had never known existed. As I stared at the smiling faces of the woman and 2 children in the photographs, a wave of nausea washed over me. How could he have done this? How could he have so callously betrayed not only me, but an entire other family? In that moment, something inside me shifted. The anger and hurt gave way to a burning determination for justice, for retribution against the man who had so thoroughly deceived us all. With a steely resolve, I began to piece together a plan, meticulously gathering evidence and reaching out to Miles's other victims, his first wife and children, who had been left in the dark about his double life. When I finally confronted him, Miles broke down, his carefully constructed facade crumbling under the weight of his lies. "Please, Harper," he begged, tears streaming down his face. "I never meant to hurt anyone. I was weak, and I lost control." But his pleas fell on deaf ears. The man I had once loved was gone, replaced by a shell of a human being consumed by his own selfish desires. In the end, my revenge was swift and merciless. I exposed Miles's gambling addiction and secret family to our friends and loved ones, watching as his reputation crumbled to dust. His first wife filed for divorce, and he found himself cut off from the very support system he had taken for granted. As for me, I channeled my pain into a newfound purpose, helping other families torn apart by addiction and deception. Through my work, I found redemption and a sense of closure, finally able to leave the twisted trail of heartbreak and betrayal behind me. Miles's fate was sealed, a cautionary tale of what happens when one allows their demons to consume them. And though the scars of his betrayal would never fully heal, I took solace in the knowledge that I had emerged from the darkness stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever before.
My name is Jenny White. I am 27 years old and a housewife. I married my husband, Alex, who is 3 years older than me, 3 years ago. We've struggled to have children, but our relationship had been relatively good. However, that all changed due to my husband's actions. Instead of showing remorse, you present me with divorce papers. Are you sane? The action that ruined our relationship was my husband's affair with my childhood friend, Kristen. When confronted about the affair, he showed no remorse and instead presented me with prepared divorce papers, declaring, "Why should I have to be the one to apologize? The affair was because of your infertility. I get so tired of coming home to this might work or that might be good. I'm sick of it. I got married when I was 24. We wanted children and started trying to conceive immediately after our wedding. Being young, I thought it would be easy to conceive without any trouble. However, it didn't go as planned, and I didn't get pregnant at all in these 3 years. He justified his affair with Kristen by blaming it on this. People normally can have children without any trouble. But you've wasted so much time and money because of you. As I vented to her, we ended up in that kind of relationship. I don't see why you should blame me. And yet, how could you? No matter what you say, I am going to divorce you and remarry Kristen. Kristen is now pregnant with my child. What? My child that couldn't be conceived with you. Happened immediately when I was with Kristen. That's why I intended to divorce you. And remarry her even before you confronted me about the affair. It just worked out well. As it turns out, my childhood friend Kristen is pregnant with my husband's child. It seems he was planning to choose her over me from the start. I contacted Kristen, but she repeated the same things my husband had said. Disappointed by the actions of my childhood friend, I realized arguing was futile and accepted the divorce. That was 32 years ago. I am now 59, and I barely remember those times. Yet, fate has a strange way of reuniting people, and I unexpectedly ran into them again. Is that Jenny? What? Indeed. It is Jenny. What are you doing here? Do you know where you are? This is the maternity clinic, the maternity clinic. What do you need at a maternity clinic? Are you still not giving up on having children at your age? I was at a maternity clinic that had just opened last year in our hometown. The fact that I, infertile, was at a maternity clinic seemed amusing enough to them to point and laugh openly. We haven't seen each other in a while, but you're still the same. I understand the desire for children as a woman. But you're really making the doctors cry, aren't you? If you're infertile and childless at your age, there's no hope left, right? You might even be getting taken advantage of. Letting you hope while draining your money. That's possible. Whatever you say now doesn't affect me anymore. But maybe you should look around? This is a maternity clinic, as you say. It's a hospital. If you can't be quiet, please leave once your business is done so you don't bother other people. Their words echoed in the quiet waiting room. And the other patients frowned upon hearing them. Unperturbed by the reactions around them, they looked at each other and snickered. We'd love to leave, but we can't just yet. Actually, the daughter Kristen was pregnant with back then is now pregnant herself. We're here for her checkup. So, we can't leave until her appointment is over. I see. Moreover, the doctor seeing her is the head of this maternity clinic. The hospital is new, just opened last year. And the head is only 31 years old but is reputed to be very skilled. Being supportive during the unstable times of pregnancy. But Jenny, you wouldn't know about that, would you? Sorry. The two of them laughed mockingly at my silence. Their disdainful and belittling nature unchanged from 32 years ago. Witnessing this, I decided it was time to reveal a truth they were unaware of. I'm proud as a mother to hear such praise for my son. What? Son? Mother? You can't possibly have a child, can you? Have you finally lost your mind from wanting children so much? When did I say I didn't have a child? After you and I divorced, I remarried a man I met 6 months later. I found out I was pregnant soon after. And the son I had then is the one who opened this hospital. What? That's impossible. You must be lying just to show off. There's no way she, who didn't get pregnant even once in 3 years, could remarry and get pregnant immediately. Even if she did have a son, do you really think he could become a doctor? She wouldn't have the earnings to send him to medical school. That's all just bluff. There's no need to pay her any mind. It was then. Ah, Mrs. White, were you here? I've been looking for you. Didn't you hear the call at the reception? What? Actually, I need to talk to both of you about your daughter. Mom. Mom? Wait, what exactly is? Didn't I tell you earlier? He's my son. There's nothing strange about my son calling me Mom. Yes, today my sister came for a prenatal checkup. My husband is overseas on a business trip, so Mom came to accompany her. Mom, Erica's checkup will be almost over soon. The doctor said everything is going well. That's good to hear. I'll have to contact my husband later. The two were shocked as they watched our exchange. What did you say? You have 2 children. She must be the stepchildren from your remarriage, right? That's the only thing that makes sense. Still doubting? My son and daughter are both truly mine, born to me. That's impossible. Then my son responded to their conversation. Stepchildren from a remarriage, what do you mean? Wait, Mom, you knew Mr. White? My son knew I was divorced, but of course, he didn't know my ex-husband's name or face. He looked puzzled and asked me. They're not just acquaintances, they are my ex-husband and my former childhood friend. I don't know what fate it is, but we met here for the first time in 32 years. I never wanted to see them again. Then my son's expression changed. Oh, is this about that time you were treated as infertile? And he chose your childhood friend? You told your own son about that. I didn't tell him. But he found out when he was in middle school. He found the documents when I was seeking compensation through a lawyer. He asked me what it was all about. So, I told him. What exactly you two did. But still. Well, what happened in the past doesn't concern me. It happened before I was born. But what do you think about cheating because of infertility? We have many patients who come here struggling with infertility. Most couples work hard together to address the issue. Men who blame infertility on women and cheat are rare. But, actually, the causes of infertility are nearly equal between men and women. Most men who cheat blaming infertility are mistaken. We often hear stories where upon testing, it turns out there was nothing wrong with the wife, but the problem was with the husband. I can understand not wanting to accept that you might be the cause of infertility. But to cheat without even testing and blaming it on the woman. As a doctor and as a man, I think it's the lowest thing you can do. Especially with your wife's childhood friend, it's unthinkable. But, well, thanks to Mr. White divorcing her, I exist as I am today. It's complicated, though. And it seems like Mom is happy now. She married a lawyer, and then my sister and I were born. What did you just say? A lawyer, father. Yes, my father is a lawyer. He was a paralegal at a law firm when he met my mother. He became a lawyer quite soon after that. Right? No way, that law firm is. Yes, I met him at the law firm I consulted about you. He was working there as a paralegal. He was assisting a lawyer. After our interactions ended, he approached me, and we were married within 6 months. Just now, you said my son couldn't possibly become a doctor. Indeed, my earnings alone might not have been enough to send my son to a university with a medical school. But by marrying my husband and combining our efforts, we were able to send our son to medical school. Of course, it was possible because of my son's own hard work. We just supported him from behind. I am grateful to my husband and children. They have given me happiness I couldn't have imagined when you left me. At my words, the two were speechless and fell silent. By the way, you mentioned earlier that you were looking for them. Is something wrong? Is there something you want to know about your daughter? Oh yes, that was it. Do you both know your blood types? Blood type? Yes, there's something I need to confirm. I'm A. I'm O. What? What's the matter? Do you know your daughter's blood type? Yes. I believe my wife said she's a type. I think she thinks she's a type too. What about it? While they were talking, I glanced at Kristen, who was sweating profusely and holding her face in her hands. Then, my son's next words revealed the reason. Actually, when we did a blood test on your daughter, we discovered that her blood type is not A but B. What? In the early stages of pregnancy, we conduct tests to ensure there are no risks to the mother and child during the pregnancy. We also test the mother's blood type. This is also to ensure quick response in case an emergency transfusion is needed. As your husband mentioned earlier, your daughter said she was type A. However, we can't just transfuse type A blood based on that statement alone. If by any chance she had a blood type that couldn't receive type A, it would be a serious problem. And this time, to prevent any such emergencies, we tested your daughter's blood type and found out it is not A, but B. That's impossible. What did my daughter say about this? We haven't spoken to your daughter and her husband yet. There could be various circumstances. So we thought we'd check with the parents first since they were at the hospital. We had the reception call you earlier. My son informed them that their daughter's blood type, B, could not have come from two parents who are A and O. The ex-husband stood there stunned. What does this mean? Why would B type arise from A and O types? It must be a mistake. It has to be. That's the only explanation. Were you cheating? What? With some B-type man? What are you starting now? There's no way I did such a thing. But the fact is, she's said to be B-type. B-type can only come from a parent who is B or AB type. Since we're A and O, we don't have the genes for a B-type child. Explain what this means. The ex-husband's voice echoed in the waiting room, creating a complete scene. Mr. White, please calm down. How can I be calm? For 32 years, I thought she was my daughter. And now there's a suspicion she might be someone else's. Who exactly is? By the way, wasn't Kristen's longtime boyfriend B-type? At these words, Kristen appeared shocked. What are you saying? Remember, you had been dating him for nearly 10 years just before you decided to remarry my ex-husband. I think he said he was type B. Why do you know my boyfriend's blood type? We once went out together, remember? On our way back, we saw a sign for a blood donation bus. He casually mentioned, they're short on type B blood right now. And I'm type B, maybe I should donate. He actually went to donate. So I remember clearly. You, with that man? It's not like that. She is truly your child. Then why is her blood type B? Think about it, it's impossible for two parents with types A and O to produce a type B child. Were you cheating? To catch my attention, did you pretend her boyfriend's child was mine? No. Believe me. She is definitely type A. She was tested at birth. The mistake is with this doctor. They must be confusing her results with someone else's. Talking big about opening a practice so young. Maybe he's a quack? Just a moment ago, you were bragging about how skilled and reputable the doctor handling your daughter is. You change your opinions too quickly. Busy person, aren't you? But that's because. And it's far-fetched to say that the child is his. What do you mean by that? You knew, didn't you? What? That it wasn't me who was infertile, but him. What are you talking about? Why would I be infertile? Didn't our son just say? Infertility isn't just a woman's issue. But why am I supposed to be infertile? That has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with it. The doctors told me clearly back then. Indeed, it was my husband, not I, who was diagnosed with infertility at that time. The words I spoke turned their faces pale with shock. It's a lie, right? It's a joke, right? It's neither a lie nor a joke. But that's never been mentioned. What are you talking about? Have you forgotten? They tested me and found no cause of infertility. So they suggested your husband should also be tested. You were tested, weren't you? I told you that the issue was with you. I never heard such a thing. I definitely told you. But you never took my words seriously. All infertility is the woman's fault. A man could never be the cause of infertility. Because it's the woman who has to get pregnant. That's what you used to say. But that's. I kept telling you to go to the hospital with me over and over. But you insisted it was my fault. At that time, it came out that you were cheating on me with my childhood friend Kristen. When confronted, Kristen said she was pregnant with your child. The doctors had told you that without treatment, natural conception was almost impossible for you. I wondered how you could have easily gotten Kristen pregnant, but it was just as I thought. Are you really saying that? I wouldn't lie about something like this. So, the reason I couldn't get pregnant during our 3 years of marriage was because you were infertile. I've given birth to 2 children since then. That's the proof. It can't be true. Ah. It's been 32 years, so I don't know what has changed since then. But at that time, I was certainly told that was the case. Such a thing. If what you are saying is true, then that child might not be mine after all. If it bothers you that much, why not get a DNA test? That might clear up any doubts you have. And Kristen, you must have had an inkling, right? That despite trying, you couldn't get pregnant. Perhaps he was also a reason for the infertility. So, you got pregnant by your boyfriend at the time and claimed it was his child? Kristen, no. That's not true. That child is definitely ours. After raising her for 32 years, why would you get swayed by what your ex-wife says now? Besides, just because it was almost impossible doesn't mean it was absolutely impossible, right? There might still be a chance. Just because you were told you are infertile doesn't mean there is 0 chance of natural conception. There is still a possibility. See, I told you. But if you're going to bring up this topic, as I mentioned earlier, it's impossible for parents with blood types A and O to have a child with blood type B. That's 100% certain. So, what does that mean? If either of your blood types was recorded incorrectly, there might be a chance of having a child with blood type B. But if your blood types are definitely A and O, it's difficult to say. But it's highly likely that she is not your child. That's basically what it means. How can you say that? Do you think it's okay for a gynecologist to tell someone that's not your child? People do ask sometimes. Patients ask if it's possible for 2 type A parents to have a type B child. If both parents are type A, the child can only be A or O. Conversely, if one parent is A and the other is B, then the child could be of any blood type. In such cases, it's my duty as a doctor to convey the truth. Fudging or lying can lead to serious issues for everyone involved later on. When the son explained this, Kristen turned bright red and began trembling. So, you mean the child might actually? As I said earlier, if there was a mistake with the parents' blood types, it wouldn't be strange for the child's blood type to be different. Is it possible for there to be a mistake with the parents' blood types? Sometimes the blood type tested at birth can be wrong. Or perhaps you misunderstood the blood type you were told by your parents when you were a child. But it's unlikely there was a mistake with the mother's blood type, especially since blood tests are done during the early stages of pregnancy. Like with your daughter. That means the mistake might be with the father. Have you ever had a major illness or surgery? I had surgery after an accident in my 20s. Then they would have tested your blood type. Have you ever been told there was a mistake with your blood type? No. I see. Then there's only one possibility. The father must have the B gene. Enough. Stop it. I've been quiet listening to you. Talking about someone's daughter as if she's a child born from an affair. Do you think you have a duty to tell the truth? Was there any need to blab about such private matters? I'll sue you for defamation. Even if she turns out to be your biological child, a child born from an affair isn't wrong. Because she was conceived through an affair with my husband. What did you say? And if you're thinking of suing me for defamation, you should be prepared to be sued yourselves. What? In this busy maternity clinic waiting room. This isn't a place for the infertile. It's pitiful that you can't have children. Who said those words to me? Well. At that moment, the two finally noticed the piercing stares of those around them. There were couples struggling with infertility and women suffering from illnesses. Their cruel words had everyone glaring at them. So, that was, Go ahead and sue if you want. Do as you like. But don't forget you've done even worse. Cornered, she glared at me and snapped. What are you saying I've done? Ganging up and blaming me like this. I feel sick. What do you mean that's not your child? So what if my daughter's blood type turned out to be B? Children with blood type B might be born from A and O type parents, right? It was then. Wait, what does that mean about my blood type being B? You said a child can't be born from two type A and O parents, right? Their daughter and her husband, having finished their consultation, had come to the waiting room after hearing the commotion. Nicole, please tell me clearly. No, that's not it. It's just a mistake by the doctor or something. A mistake? That can't be right, can it? We've had proper tests at the hospital. Doctor, am I really type B? Yes. Definitely type B. And a child cannot be born from A and O types, right? That's correct. Nicole? Mom, are you listening to me? I think you should listen to my story first. Am I not your child? No, that's not true. That can't be. Then why was I born with type B from A and O type parents? That's strange, isn't it? No, because. And you said earlier. That mom's old boyfriend was type B. Could he be my real dad? That's. Answer me. How can this be happening when I'm about to have my first child? Why is there a doubt now that I might not be your child? With that, she broke down in tears. My heart ached seeing her cry. Pregnancy is a mentally unstable period already. To discover that she might have a different blood type from her parents at such a time. Nicole. Let's go home and talk. It's too public here, and we can't discuss this calmly. So, don't touch me. Just leave me alone for a bit. I'll contact you when I've calmed down. Until then, I don't want to see either of you. Saying that, the daughter and her husband turned to leave. Wait, Nicole. Hey, Nicole. Ignoring her parents, she and her husband headed for the exit. And her parents hurriedly followed. This has turned into a huge mess. Did I maybe say something wrong? I never thought it would turn out like this. No, you didn't. This is their own doing. It was bound to be revealed eventually. It just so happened that the truth came out today after 32 years. As I watched their retreating figures, I relayed this to my son. Later, my son shared more news with me. The other day, Mrs. Ito came to our hospital. It seems that they did a DNA test after that, and it turned out the husband wasn't the father. I suspected as much. But why did she come to you? Well, after that, they discussed it as a family. They ordered a DNA kit online and tested it. And the result showed 99% certainty that there was no parental relationship between the husband and the daughter. She insisted the results were definitely wrong and demanded our hospital conduct another DNA test properly. I told her the DNA testing kits she used were highly reliable, and repeating the tests wouldn't change the outcome. She just wouldn't listen, kept saying this can't be happening. This will lead to divorce, our family will fall apart. So what ended up happening? We did the test. But of course, the results didn't change. The daughter was 99% not his child. When she saw the results, the wife exploded in anger. She couldn't believe it, accused us of lying, and started causing a scene. Eventually, we couldn't handle it ourselves, and we had to call the police to take her away. That must have been tough. It was more than tough. We see all sorts of people at the hospital, but that was unprecedented. With a heavy sigh, he recounted the events. A few months later, I received a call from an unknown number on my smartphone. It was her ex-husband. His voice was grave as he spoke. After that, I did a DNA paternity test with my daughter. And just like you said, we are not biologically related. I never imagined this could happen. Before I met you that day, it never crossed my mind. Then things got messy with Kristen. In the end, she confessed the child was from her boyfriend at the time. She was distressed he hadn't proposed, and we got married. She was jealous and took me from you, thinking if she got pregnant by me, who was struggling with infertility, it would be easy to take me away. But she couldn't get pregnant, ended up back with her boyfriend. Got pregnant by him, and then lied that it was my child. For 32 years. I see. He thought I didn't know about Kristen storming into my son's gynecology clinic. So he shared the entire story with me. In the end, I divorced Kristen. Moreover, after hearing the whole story, our daughter. She decided to cut ties, blocked my calls. My parents are gone, and I have no siblings. I'm all alone now. That's unfortunate. But why tell me all this? That's just it. If you had listened to me earlier, maybe it wouldn't have ended like this. But it's too late for regrets now. This is the future you chose back then. After that conversation, I never saw him again. Where he is or what he's doing now, I don't know, but he surely regrets his choices deeply.